We only have one ciliate to talk about. So ciliates move through the use of cilia. The one that we will briefly discuss is Balantidium coli. So coli tells you it's, gastrointestinal. There's a trophozoite and a cyst stage, illustrated here. The trophozoite is motile through the cilia. It has a primitive mouth, kind of illustrated right here. It has 2 nuclei, food vacuoles, and a contractile vacuole. In some of your earlier biology classes, you may have seen ciliates under a microscope or something like that. One of the ciliates that's relatively common to look at, or a group of the ciliates that are common to look at, are like paramecium. So it may look a little bit similar to paramecium under the microscope. So this is a fecal oral infection, often caused by something contaminated with pig feces, though it can be spread person to person as well. So good hygiene is always important. Patients can be asymptomatic, but patients who do experience symptoms, those symptoms would include pain, nausea, loss of appetite, watery stool, with the presence of blood and pus. It can cause ulceration of the intestinal mucosa, which can allow the blood and sometimes immune cells to be in there as well. It would be diagnosed by microscopy of the feces, and you're looking for a ciliated eukaryotic cell that has macro and micro nuclei. If you do a wet mount, you can see the contractile vacuoles opening and closing. And for these, the drug treatment of choice is tetracycline, but of course, hygiene and sanitation are the best preventatives. Our last group of parasites are going to be the Apicomplexans, the most common of which are Plasmodium species. And Plasmodium species cause malaria. Lots and lots and lots of different types of organisms get malaria. In humans, we acquire malaria infection through the bite of mosquitoes belonging to the genus Anopheles. It is thought that Plasmodium species worldwide cause anywhere from 1 to 5 billion episodes of fever a year and 1 to 3 million deaths annually. There are 5 different species of Plasmodium that are listed here that cause disease in people. If you study animals, there are other species of Plasmodium that cause disease in animals. As with some of our other parasites, Plasmodium has a really complex life cycle, lots of different stages. Again, I'm not asking you to remember the different stages of Plasmodium. You don't have to name all of the different life cycles. I just want you to understand that it's a very complex organism with lots of different forms that can be found in the body. So infection is acquired from the bite of an infected mosquito. The form that's injected into the patient will often go eventually into the liver. It will be found in the bloodstream. It is often diagnosed by finding a form called the ring form in red blood cells. But you can also diagnose various life stages within the bloodstream that are not in the red blood cells. And as it circulates through the bloodstream, it could be picked up again by another mosquito and transmitted to another host. What you see in the top image are some of the forms that can infect the red blood cells. So you're seeing some infected red blood cells. You can have multiple parasites infect a red blood cell. With Plasmodium falciparum, you can also find one of their life stages in part of the blood smear. We see malaria, at least in people, almost exclusively in tropical and subtropical regions. The range of the mosquito, treatment of disease, generally why we don't see it in other parts of the world. Daily fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. Destroyed red blood cells can cause damage to the body, and Plasmodium falciparum is actually the most deadly species. So that's the one we would worry about the most. Malaria can be diagnosed through blood smears or rapid antigen tests. The treatment of choice is a drug called chloroquine. However, there are now drug-resistant or chloroquine-resistant strains of Plasmodium. These would often require combination therapy. Prophylaxis can be given if you are traveling to a known endemic area. You would ask your physician, tell them, I'm traveling to an area where there's malaria. Could I please have a preventative? And they will almost certainly give it to you. The best way to prevent infection, though, is to prevent yourself from being bitten by mosquitoes. So insect repellent, mosquito nets, very common in malaria endemic areas. Our last unicellular parasite is Toxoplasma gondii. This parasite is most commonly associated with cats, specifically house cats, because that's the type of cat most people are exposed to. Other cats are the reservoir hosts as well, but again, house cats are most common. We can start here at the back end of the cat. So the cat will pass, again, you don't have to know all the life stages. So the cat will pass the life stage that will eventually be infectious in the feces. It will mature in the feces to become the infectious stage, which is then most often acquired through ingestion. And you're probably thinking to yourself, people don't eat cat poop, so how do people get Toxoplasma gondii? Well, the parasite can infect other animals. So people can get Toxoplasma gondii by the consumption of other animals. But also when changing a cat litter box, if the feces has had a chance to dry out really at all, the form can become aerosolized and get into your mouth. I know that sounds super gross. Lots of people have cats. I have cats. It is what it is. That is the way. Once in the body, it goes through multiple life stages. Humans are a dead-end host because cats can only acquire the infection by eating an infected organism. And unless unless you die at home with your 20 cats and are left there so your cats eat you, it is almost an impossibility that a cat will get Toxoplasma from a human. But other vertebrates, including rodents and birds, definitely. Why is the emphasis on cats? Well, because this particular parasite can only undergo sexual reproduction in cats. So some parasites are super weird, very, very limited into the hosts they can infect. So they can only undergo sexual reproduction in a cat. So they have to get to a cat. Human infection is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. It is worldwide. Lots and lots of people have been infected with Toxoplasma gondii, mostly because of their house cats. But most people also don't experience symptoms. There are severe complications, though, in patients who are immune compromised. So in some patients, like HIV patients, an overwhelming Toxoplasma gondii infection can be a cause of death. There are two sources of infection: ingestion of improperly cooked meat and ingestion of oocytes from cat feces. The levels of infection are higher in populations that typically consume raw meat. In the US, we don't commonly eat raw meat. It's just not a staple part of the majority of people's diets. What we worry about with Toxoplasma, aside from our immune-compromised patients, is our pregnant patients. Patients who are infected with Toxoplasma gondii, meaning they acquire the infection during pregnancy, especially during the first trimester, can experience spontaneous abortion, eventual stillbirth, or severe disease in the fetus. During later stages of pregnancy, the child could be born with epilepsy, encephalitis, microcephaly, hydrocephalus, mental retardation, blindness, anemia, etc. So huge, huge, huge issue. That is why they always recommend, if you are pregnant or planning to become pregnant, that you do not change cat litter boxes, that you get someone else to do that. However, if your cats are indoor only cats and you take appropriate precautions, such as maybe wearing a face mask, wearing gloves, very good with your hygiene, washing your hands, etc., the risk is relatively low. An indoor cat that has always been an indoor cat is almost certainly not infected with Toxoplasma unless rats have gotten in the house or something. But it's not worth the risk, so be very careful as much as possible. It can also be transmitted through IV drug use. So patients who use intravenous drugs and share needles can share Toxoplasma gondii. Most adult infections are asymptomatic. In patients who do experience symptoms, it can be chills, fever, headache, pain, fatigue, rash, liver involvement, encephalomyelitis, myocarditis. What it does is it causes cell destruction and cyst formation, and these cysts will form in organs like the brain. But the parasite can also attack the heart, the lungs, the lymphoid tissue, the central nervous system, and the eyes. So Toxoplasma, what you see in this image is an MRI of the brain, and all of these little white dots here are Toxoplasma cysts. This is going to be very, very uncommon in an otherwise healthy patient. This patient may be immune compromised. But because it does like to go to the brain, people have all of these hypotheses about cats. So is your cat lowering your grades? You cannot use that as an excuse. But maybe, right? If it goes to your brain, who knows? Do cats control my mind? In some patients, there is a correlation that, maybe higher rates of schizophrenia, aggressive behavior, impulse control issues. Again, correlation, not necessarily causation. How and why Toxoplasma makes us crazy. This was published about 10 years ago. It manipulates people's behavior. It seems to make men more introverted, suspicious, unattractive to women, and oblivious to the way others see them. Perhaps because they're oblivious to the way others see them, maybe issues with personal hygiene, and that's what makes them unattractive. I don't know. Infected women, inversely, have been shown to be more outgoing, trusting, sexually adventurous, attractive to men, and image conscious. Infected men tend to break more rules than their uninfected peers, but infected women tend to follow the rules more. Both are more likely to have traffic accidents, develop schizophrenia, and engage in self-directed violence. And then, I don't know if you watch The Simpsons. I love The Simpsons. This is the crazy cat lady. And I guess the backstory is that she used to be an MD or something. She's super, super smart. Maybe being around all the cats made her crazy. Who knows? So again, Toxoplasma can cause severe disease in immunocompromised patients. This is what it can look like embedded in tissues. Serology can diagnose an acute active infection. Encephalitis would be diagnosed by MRI. Of course, you can do PCR. You can look at the CSF, and it can be treated with combination therapy. So here's a short video I thought was pretty interesting, so we'll go ahead and watch this.
Is there a disease that makes us love cats? And do you have it? Maybe. And it's more likely than you'd think. We're talking about toxoplasmosis, a disease caused by Toxoplasma gondii. Like all parasites, Toxoplasma lives at the expense of its host and needs its host to produce offspring. To do that, Toxo orchestrates a brain manipulation scheme involving cats, their rodent prey, and virtually all other birds and mammals, including humans. Documented human infections go as far back as ancient Egypt. We found samples in mummies. Today, about a third of the world's population is infected, and most of them never even know it. In healthy people, symptoms often don't show up at all. When they do, they're mild and flu-like. But those are just the physical symptoms. Toxoplasma also nestles into our brains and meddles with our behavior behind the scenes. To understand why, let's take a look at the parasite's life cycle. While the parasite can multiply in practically any host, it can only reproduce sexually in the intestines of cats. The offspring, called oocysts, are shed in the cat's feces. A single cat can shed up to 100 million oocysts. If another animal, like a mouse, accidentally ingests them, they'll invade the mouse's tissues and mature to form tissue cysts. If the mouse gets eaten by a cat, the tissue cysts become active and release offspring that mate to form new oocysts, completing the cycle. But there's a problem. A mouse's natural desire to avoid a cat makes it tough to close this loop. Toxoplasma has a solution for that. The parasites invade white blood cells to hitch a ride to the brain, where they seem to override the innate fear of predators. Infected rodents are more reckless and have slower reaction times. Strangest of all, they're actually attracted to feline urine, which probably makes them more likely to cross paths with a cat and help the parasite complete its life cycle. How does the parasite pull this off? Although the exact mechanism isn't known, Toxo appears to increase dopamine, a brain neurotransmitter that is involved in novelty-seeking behavior. Thus, one idea is that Toxo tinkers with neurotransmitters, the chemical signals that modulate emotions. The result? Fatal attraction. But mice aren't the only animals that end up with these parasites, and that's where humans and all of Toxo's other hosts come in. We can accidentally ingest oocysts in contaminated water or unwashed produce, or from playing in sandboxes or cleaning out litter boxes. This is behind the common recommendation that pregnant women not change cat litter. Toxo can cause serious birth defects. We can also get Toxo from eating undercooked meat from other animals that picked up some oocysts. And it turns out that Toxo can mess with our brains too. Studies have found connections between Toxo and schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and aggression. It also slows reactions and decreases concentration, which may be why one study found that people involved in traffic accidents were almost 3 times more likely to have Toxoplasma. So, is Toxo manipulating our brains as an evolutionary strategy to get predatory cats to eat us? Or are our brains just similar enough to a rodent's that the same neurological tricks that lure them in catch us in the net too? And is Toxo the reason so many people love cats and keep them as pets? Well, the jury's still out on that one. Some recent studies even contradict the idea. Regardless, Toxoplasma has definitely benefited from humans to become one of the world's most successful parasites. It's not just our willingness to let cats on our dining room tables or in our beds. Raising livestock and building cities which attract rodents has provided billions of new hosts. And you and your cat may be 2 of them.